Cookie!
And welcome to another fun-filled episode of the Faux Sang Elizabeth Cookie Show. I can't thank you enough for being very patient as I released the second episode, season 5 of my weblog. As promised, I would release one episode a month. Here it is. I'm just going to get right into it because I have a lot of news that I'd like to share with all of you guys. So first things up on the agenda is this: the news in China dealing with the Japanese animation community. So there is a newspaper called the Bao, which is Jiaobao. Bao means newspaper, and Jia means family, so this is like family newspaper. So they're talking about destroying Japanese animation in China because there is a lack of patronage for their own Chinese animation, which of course at the moment is inferior to Japanese technology. So I'm going to read from this little excerpt here. This can be found on the Senkaku Complex, senkakucomplex.com, if you want to know more about this information, dealing with China trying to ban Japanese animation out of the mainland. So China in recent years has been working to strengthen its domestic anime industry with a variety of successful titles. So there's a Chinese anime called Pleasant Goat and Big Wolf Wolf. Now, apparently the title doesn't really sound all that entertaining, yet it has managed to garner 500 episodes. And through these 500 episodes, it has been getting all over China. It's famous. Well, I guess it won't be because it's the only thing that they really have. And so they're using that to try and combat Japanese animation out of China. That being the case, however, there's been heavy restrictions on the amount of foreign programming allowed to ensure fans of international anime do legitimate recourse to view their favorite titles. So in other words, the other way China can get people to look at their own animation is to ban Japanese animation out. I would like to know what are your thoughts on this. People who are watching this episode, what do you think? To learn more about that idea and the story, go to senkakucomplex.com. Senkakucomplex.com. That's SANKAKU complex.com. Let me know what your thoughts are on that subject. So next thing is, I want to say thank you everyone for Happy Chinese New Year, or Happy Lunar New Year. As we all know, that happened sometime in the middle of February, around the 15th. Don't quote me on that. But what I can say is the Chinese New Year parade happened February 23rd here in Chinatown, San Francisco. Unfortunately, unlike last year, the Year of the Dragon, I was unable to attend this year, and I attend all the Chinese New Year parades. However, I did catch a mini parade in Bloomingdale's in San Francisco. That was pretty interesting. And then at the end of their parade, or their supposed lion dance, they then gave everybody red envelopes with $5 gift certificates inside, in which you can only use at Bloomingdale's. Now tell me how stupid that shit is. You would think you'd be able to cash in the $5 and use what you want to do with it. Anyway, happy Year of the Snake. And for those who don't know, the Year of the Snake is supposed to bring great chaos and turmoil. Now, in the sense that turmoil being fluctuation in everyone's life. So don't look at turmoil as being bad this time around. The fluctuation is supposed to happen to make you a better person, so that as you go on throughout the year of 2013, expect a lot of unexpected changes and a lot of unexpected occurrences to happen. Throughout these occurrences, this is supposed to be a test of all of us on how well we can deal with these fluctuations. Research is key to the Year of the Snake. So those who do research and those who consider all their options before making proper decisions and all of their endeavors are said to have come out on top. So whatever it is that you do, do proper research, look at all angles of your situation to assess your problem, whether it be good or bad, and then choose the right one for you. Throughout that, you are said to come out on top. Happy Year of the Snake. All right, going into the next piece of news and information that I have here on my list, I just want to talk about the bullet train. So yes, we're about to, Murphy, you got the footage? Yes, Murphy is going to show us the footage in a minute. But we're talking about the bullet train. I want to give reference to a friend of mine who actually tipped me out on this. Thank you, Rob Miles, living in San Leandro, who actually gave me a tip on the bullet train. Coming here to the United States, it was a project that started last year in 2012 and is not going to end until 2022. So, the bullet train is the first fast train to hit stateside. As we all know, it's been in Japan for the longest and is known as the maglev in China and has been traveling all over Europe. For the first time, it'll come here to the United States of America by the end of 2022 and is said to travel from San Diego to Sacramento, from LA to San Francisco. And a typical trip that would last by car 5.5 to 6 hours is now going to be 2.5 hours on a train that will travel over 350 miles per hour. Murphy, show them the footage. All right, Cookye fans, one of today's hot topics is something that's been under discussion since 2008. It's been a project that's been in California and an idea that finally came into fruition in 2012. It would be the bullet train to hit North America for the first time, but on the West Coast. The California High-Speed Rail Project is a planned high-speed rail system in the state of California and headed for the High-Speed Rail Authority. Initial funding for the project was approved by California voters on November 4th in 2008, with the passage of a Proposition 1A authorizing the insurance of the U.S. $995 billion in general obligation bonds for the project. The CHSRA is currently tasked with completing final planning preparations, designs, and environmental efforts that the system would serve major cities including Sacramento, San Francisco, San Jose, Fresno, Bakersfield, Palmdale, Los Angeles, Anaheim, Riversdale, Irving, and San Diego. Could we imagine, for those who live in San Francisco, a trip to LA, which is normally 5.5 to 6 hours by vehicle, to reach there in 2.5 hours? On July 6, 2012, the California legislature approved construction financing this initial stage of the project. Jerry Brown signed the bill on July 18th. The funding approved excludes $4.5 billion in bonds previously approved by voters, which in turn freed up $3.2 billion in federal funding that would otherwise have expired after July 6. $2.6 billion, which was used to build the initial 130-mile, 209 kilometers segment of the high-speed line from Madera to Bakersfield in the Central Valley. This project is still ongoing. This is technology that has already been around for quite some time in Japan, and the bullet train is also known as the maglev in Shanghai, China, which their bullet train runs from one end of Tibet all the way to Peking, which is modern-day Beijing. Europe has also been utilizing this technology along with Russia and other countries of the world. What would it be like if we had this high-speed rail system here on the West Coast in the United States? The concept is already becoming more broad as other legislators start to talk about, well, if we're going to have this kind of technology take us from San Francisco or Sacramento to Los Angeles and San Diego in under 3 hours, approximately 2 hours and 30 minutes, then what would it be like to have a bullet train and take us from the West Coast all the way to East Coast, aka San Francisco, all the way to New York, in less than a day possibly? The train is stated to run at a maximum of 330 miles per hour when not hit by any obstructions such as mountains, terrain, or any sharp turns. This is a project that is stated to be in state of completion in 2022. Thank you for listening to this segment. I look so much forward to keeping everybody in the anime community very more informed about the bullet train hitting the West Coast. Just for food for thought, what would it be like to have the bullet train on the West Coast actually travel from the Pacific Ocean to Hawaii and then from Hawaii to Japan, China, and Korea? It would be an alternative route for those who are afraid of flying to actually take an experienced train route across a wide range of ocean from one end of the world to the other. So what did you think of that? The bullet train on the West Coast traveling from San Diego to Sacramento, from LA to San Francisco. Now, what I said at the end of the footage was, could we imagine having the bullet train travel from California all the way to New York, and then from Canada all the way to Florida? That's something that we would like to think about. And then in the far distant future from now, I was thinking, for those who don't like to fly, it would be cool to have a bullet train that traveled from California to Hawaii over that large range of water, and then from Hawaii to China, Japan, and even possibly Korea. Something to think about. These are things that you only see really in Japanese animation. Now, moving on to the next thing. I wanted to talk about Chinese fashion that shows up in Japanese animation, or in this case, women that wear the qipao, the cheongsam, Mandarin-style collared Qing Dynasty wear seen in Japanese animation. The never-ending, reinvented, and always revitalized, renovated qipao Chinese-style dress. The stuff that y'all always usually see me wear during my episodes. Like even this blouse is what would be considered the Qing Dynasty Mandarin-style Manchurian fashion. Manchurian fashion updated for the 21st century, always being seen of women in the shoujo senshi world of Japanese animation. So here is a little bit of news on how that actually comes to be, and let me know your thoughts about it. Murphy, show them the footage.
Today, we are looking at women of the anime universe wearing stylized versions of the Chinese traditional female garment known as the cheongsam in Cantonese, qi pao in Mandarin. At some point or another, Japanese anime has managed to continuously express its love, support, and fondness of this Chinese traditional garment due to its appeal and constant renovation within the global plateau of international high societal couture. The qipao came into its existence during China's last imperial empire, the Qing dynasty, which enforced its way of dress upon its population. This is a standard setting put into place by the powers of the Manchurian government. Women in anime that portray this highly modified and stylized version of the qipao/cheongsam typically are seen by shoujo fighters such as Chun-Li of Street Fighter, Xianghua from Soul Calibur, Athena Asamiya of King of Fighters, and most notably, Anna Williams from Tekken. There are other anime seen wearing this traditional piece, known as the women of Tenjo Tenge, the women of Ikitosen, and also Nachika Kisaragi from Nachika Blitz Tactics. Other than this, there are many other women that I haven't mentioned that also wear this highly stylized piece. The qipao will continuously be put up against the Japanese kimono only for the simple fact that the traditional kimono can take up to 3 to 4 people to help a Japanese woman put it on. During that duration, a qipao can only take one person to put on by itself, with a zipper that goes in the back or the frog buttons that fasten in the front. The qipao always being seen as a highly seductive, elegant, high-status piece is here to stay and is going nowhere as Japanese anime continue to enforce this piece upon the shoujo women of the anime universe, being seen as a very beautiful and elegant garment.
So moving on to the next topic, I'd like to reintroduce something I already talked about a while ago back home in New York City on the home front. Shanghai Tang. So basically, Shanghai Tang is China's first luxury brand name to come out of China to rival Gucci, Fendi, Prada, Ferragamo, Bottega Veneta, Valentino. This is China's way of saying, hey, we've been had quality since whenever. And so Shanghai Tang is their first global international brand to go and rival those other names in the high society world of international couture. So a little bit of information before we go into the footage. So Murphy, hold on, Murphy. So the thing is that, okay, so the qipao, or Chinese Manchurian wear of the last Qing dynasty, has always something that has been appreciated amongst international couture. So Shanghai Tang, created by David Tang, had set out on his own mission to reinvent this kind of wear for the 21st century and bring it to the international world of high fashion couture. Right now, Shanghai Tang has many locations all over the world. 2 locations, we used to have 3 here in the US. One in New York, one in Miami, Florida, and one in Las Vegas, Nevada. Unfortunately, the Las Vegas, Nevada store has closed down, and so there's only the New York branch, which is a flagship store here in North America, and the Miami branch. It will be considered their version of the Takashimaya, which is an upper-end brand store in Japan. Right now, Shanghai Tang is enjoying their success as they moved from Pedder to Duddle. The original store, which was in Hong Kong, which has moved from one street to another, they opened up the Shanghai Tang Mansion, which is a 6-7-story mansion full of nothing but upper-end Chinese wear. They also happened to open up their cafe in Xintiandi in mainland China, which shows the Shanghai Tang Cafe. Something that I'd like to see one day. I haven't been there yet. But being to Shanghai, I've seen all 3 to 4 of their locations, and I must say it is a treat. Let's just go right into the footage. Murphy, show them.
So simply put, Shanghai Tang is China's first luxury brand name to emerge out of China as it sets its stage to compete on the global international plateau of high societal fashion, haute, and couture. Shanghai Tang's biggest mission is to reorient yourself as we replace the westernized modern chic of the necktie with the Mandarin collar for both men and women. China plans to reinvent, rejuvenate, and renovate itself by constantly recreating the concept of high international fashion of Chinese couture on the global competitive scale. The Mandarin collar, which is seen as a status symbol in China's global period during the Qing Empire, is being constantly reinvented over. Shanghai Tang sees themselves as the leading emperor of pushing this movement forward. Shanghai Tang specializes in watches, accessories, home couture, and high-end brand labels for both men and women that wish to change up what would be considered as the status quo in European society. It would be these concepts that continuously show up within Japanese anime on women on what can happen when you change the traditional Mandarin collar on both men and women. Since fashion is usually centered around women, the chi pao, of course, has been seen and been rejuvenated many times over and is constantly being renovated to fit new ideas and styles of what happens when you mix the East with the West. Shanghai Tang stands along with another competitor, Blanca de Chin, as the China's world most famous first upper brand label to bring this revolution to Chinese fashion. As a side note, Shanghai Tang celebrates its new flagship opening location from Pedder Street to Duddle. This is a commercial from that scene. Shanghai Tang can be found in Miami, New York, Singapore, Shanghai, Honolulu, Hawaii, and various other locations around the world such as Dubai. Shanghai Tang has a website known as shanghaitang.com for more information on where to buy their products.
So what do you think about that? From Pedder to Duddle Street, from Pedder to Duddle Street. Unfortunately, that does not exist here on the West Coast. I would have thought that Shanghai Tang released a branch somewhere here in California, either on Rodeo Drive somewhere in LA or even somewhere in San Francisco. We just opened up a Uniqlo, which is just opened up a couple of months ago right there on Powell Street in San Francisco. It's cool to now actually go and see what the West Coast store is in congruence to the East Coast store of Uniqlo. I like both on the same level, but being here in California, we get a lot more Japanese, Chinese, Vietnamese, Filipino that actually shop here. I assume more than the East Coast version. Yeah, let me know what your thoughts is on that. Shanghai Tang, loving their new store, their mansion from Pedder to Duddle Street. Okay, moving on. So, first off, before I introduce the anime, the shoujo anime of the hour, I want to say I dedicate this episode to a friend of mine on the East Coast. Danielle, thank you very much for watching my episodes. I dedicate this anime to you. The name of this anime is called Shangri-La. Shangri-La, released in 2008 by Funimation. I'm not going to release too much of the story because I already have the footage to show you. Murphy is on standby. But I recommend this anime to you, Danielle, and anyone out there who is transgender. I know it's very hard living life as a transgender. Shit, it's hard living my life as a cross-dresser. I have no intention on changing any of my body parts, but I feel that you and I and me and many transgender have many things in common. Since we all have one thing in common, we love women's fashion. And so, this would be one of the very few anime that gives the role to a transgender a very high status, very strong role that I've seen in a very long time in any Japanese animation. We're actually one of the stars. So watch this anime, Shangri-La, released 2008 by Funimation. I'm gonna let the footage do the talking. Murphy, show them.
Okay, Shangri-La is a 24-episode anime adaptation of the Japanese science fiction light manga Shangri-La. This media was produced by Animation Studio Gonzo. The series was directed by Makoto Besho, written by Hiroshi Onogi, and featured character designs by Ranga Murata. The story is set in the mid-21st century, where upon this century, the International Committee decided to forcefully reduce CO2 emission levels to mitigate the global warming crisis in Japan. As a result, the economic market was transferred mainly into the trade of carbon. A great earthquake which destroys much of Japan, yet the carbon tax placed on the country is still not yet lifted. Tokyo is turned into the world's most largest jungle polis that absorbs carbon dioxide. Project Atlas is commenced to a plan to rebuild Tokyo and oversee the government organization, in which the Metal Age group opposes them due to their oppressive nature. However, Atlas is the only one strong enough that built room already for 3,500,000 people that not yet allowed to migrate to this city. Despite the disparity between the elite in Atlas and the refugees living in the jungles outside of its walls, the setup becomes the backdrop for which Shangri-La derives.
So yes, Shangri-La 2008, released by Funimation. The name of the transgender that is one of the main characters in the storyline is Momoko. You can look him up online on Wikipedia. You can also look him up, he has a gallery on Yahoo. Momoko, look him up. Fights with a whip, is a cross-dresser, transgender. Holds a very powerful role, very key animation character within this anime. Loved it. I've only seen 10 episodes of it. It's a 24-episode anime series. The manga is cool. It's an anime I haven't seen on this level for a while. Something good. Very entertaining. I recommend it. Dedicated to you, Danielle. Thank you for watching my episodes. And we'll be in touch very shortly. Moving on. So, next on my agenda, normally I would talk about the shoujo game of the hour. But this time around, this episode, I'm not doing a shoujo video game of the hour. Instead, I'm turning back the time to talk about the 32-bit console era. And today's 32-bit console that I'm about to be talking about is Sega Saturn. Now, as we know, Sega has had a very turbulent history. Unlike Nintendo, there has been very faithful Mario fans, but have we had faithful Sonic fans? Sega, as we know, has been very revolutionary in the arcade gaming industry with Daytona USA and other games that they released. It was one of the cutting-edge video games at the time, and Sega has been known to release cutting-edge technology for their time. Sega World has also been the pinnacle of that technology. When we go back to Sega and we think of the Genesis, we think of the Master System and all the other extra accessory devices that came with the Genesis, such as the 32X, the Sega CD, the X-Band, which have all been used to prolong the release of the Saturn when PlayStation had announced that they was entering the console gaming war. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to show the footage. These are some flash pictures. Let me know what your thoughts and what your thinking is about this. Reliving and going back to talk about the Sega Saturn. Sega, rest in peace. We love you as a third-party support, and hopefully one day you will come back to us with a new console.
Alright guys, so instead of doing a Bishoujo video game of the hour this time around, we're going into one of the most beloved video game systems to ever hit the 32-bit 5th generation console era. This would be Sega Saturn. Now, before we go further into the Sega Saturn, what it was, what it became, and how it ended, let's do a little bit of some backstory that most people really don't talk about. So, at one point, Nintendo was really seeking and trying to release the Nintendo CD, in which they partnered with Sony for making that CD-based software. According to Sony and Nintendo, the deal went bad, and because it went bad, Nintendo decided not to go with the Nintendo CD, which left Sony with all these manufactured versions of what will become the Nintendo CD. Infuriated Sony then decided to enter the console realm themselves, dubbing their system the PlayStation. When word of this got out that Nintendo had betrayed Sony, Sony had decided to enter the console market as PlayStation, and Nintendo went its own route to go towards N64, Sega then caught wind of that knowledge, and what they already had planned to release, what was called Project Aurora, was then put on hold as they added a new chip to its processing to try and create the Saturn, a much more stronger predecessor than the PlayStation 1. So while this was being done, Sega then decided to go and relaunch other items that would prolong the life of the Genesis, this being the 32X, the Sega CD, and then the X-Band, which allowed the first video game console to reach the internet. This being all one and the same, doing this to stretch the life of the Genesis gave Sega more time to continue developing Project Aurora into what would become Sega Saturn. As PlayStation from Sony continued to display all the technology that the PS1 would be able to do, they moved greatly towards 3D polygon shading and 3D rendering, whereas Sega Saturn was supposed to be the ultimate 2D gaming machine for the 32-bit 5th generation console era. This would inevitably mark Sega Saturn's undoing and their eventual demise. Okay, now for the hardcore evidence. Sega Saturn, part of the 32-bit 5th generation console era, released by Sega November 22, 1994 in Japan, May 11, 1995 in North America, and July 8, 1995 in Europe. The system was finally discontinued in North America in 1998 and in 2000 in Japan and Europe. The Saturn sold 9.4 million units worldwide, while its installed base in the US stated it ended at 2 million. Its installed base in Japan was more than 6 million units and still is a collective item up in today and still popular in occult circles. While it was popular in Japan, the Saturn failed to gain similar market share in North America and Europe from its main competitors, Sony PlayStation and later the Nintendo 64. This being the case because Sega's biggest goal was to try and translate their arcade gaming revolution to the Saturn for the perfect arcade experience versus the US market was focusing more on sports games at the time. This also noted that Sonic failed to make an appearance on the Sega Saturn in enough time to actually represent the company's most loved and beloved mascot. Sega's 27th member away team, comprising employees from hardware engineering, project developing, and marketing, worked for 2 years beginning in February '93 to design the Saturn's hardware base. Since the project was top secret and was once called Aurora, there were rumors suggested that the original design called for a single central processor. But upon hearing the PlayStation's capabilities, as mentioned before, a second processor was added in the development. What is not always talked about is the second processor was made to actually compete with the PlayStation, of course, but actually give the Saturn the ability to do 3D rendering and 3D graphics processing, something that the PlayStation was already including a part of their hardware as a separate chip. The Saturn's impressive hardware at the time of its release, but its design with 2 CPUs and 6 other processors made harnessing the power of this beautiful system so very difficult for developers to create games and conventional programming for it. Also, many of the ancillary chips in the systems were off-the-shelf components, increasing the complexity of the system because the components were not specifically designed to work together. This is what led to the many different versions of Saturns that existed in Japan, such as the White Saturn, the Hitachi Saturn, the JVC Saturn, the Hitachi Navi, and so on. Each of those companies represented the specific version of the Sega Saturn released in Japan and thus had their own marketable version special release of it. Saturn's dual CPU architecture was the source of some difficulty for developers. The biggest disadvantages was both processors, which shared the same bus, unable to access the memory registers at the same time. As a result, only one processor could utilize system memory at a time. The 4 kilobyte of cache memory in each CPU was critical to maintaining performance. In general, very careful division of processing, in addition to already challenging task of the parallelizing the code, was required to get the most out of the Saturn. Saturn today, although long gone and just a marked blip of the past of history, is still followed by many fans love it by the arcade world today. Saturn will be notably the best 2D gaming 32-bit console machine to ever hold the most in Japanese anime video games. For those who follow anime themselves, a lot of the storylines will continue forward on in separate video gaming releases. This is always being shown in separate stuff that would be moreover so like drama CDs, manga, and of course video games that would actually connect in with those storylines. As for the arcade gaming scene, Sega Saturn was known to totally outbeat the PlayStation for releasing fighting games such as Street Fighter 03, the King of Fighters series 95, 96, 97, and 98, X-Men vs. Street Fighter, Marvel vs. Street Fighter, Marvel vs. Capcom. For in the Saturn version, you was able to switch out. The PlayStation version cannot. Sega Saturn, long gone, is still a collectible item on eBay and other trading video gaming sites. For more information about the Saturn, more about its history, more about the culture, and more about rare items relating to the Saturn, such as the VCD card, which allowed it to play VCD movies, the 4 megabyte RAM card, as well as the region card, please feel free to email the Fosung Elizabeth Cookye Show on related stuff regarding to Sega Saturn.
So for all of you collectors out there who's been a patronage of the Sega world, especially Sega Saturn, Dreamcast, Genesis, Sega Master System, Game Gear, Nomad, I just want to say, going back over the Sega Saturn and one more in greater detail, the highest collective item to date in the console gaming world would be the Sega Saturn Navi, the Hitachi Navi version of the Sega Saturn. Comes with 2 karaoke ports, VCD card built in, and a navigational system, GPS, for those who want for their car. Japan is weird like that. You would put a huge 32-bit console right smack dab in the center of your car with an attached GPS system to a video game console. A GPS system hooked to a video game console. The Hitachi Navi version of the Sega Saturn. If you find it on eBay, it retails for $2,000. That's the highest worth gaming console out to date, even more than the PlayStation, the original PlayStation release of the Part 1. So yeah, Sega Saturn, 32-bit console era. Let me know what your thoughts are. Leave a comment to this video. So yes, Sega Saturn. Okay, and so now I'm going to get into my life lesson of reality, or Real Talk 101. As I said, the season is Fosung Exposes the Idiots. Well, the idiot that I'm exposing, or the title of today's life lesson, is The Social Big Picture. The social big picture. Now, what do I mean by this? I'm going to get right into the story. I was leaving my apartment one day. I went across the street because I needed to use my food stamp card. Yes, bitch, I'm on food stamps right now, but that's what happens when you're a starving artist. So I went to go across the street with my food stamp to go buy some sodas from the nearby bodega, corner store for those who don't know what bodega is. And as I'm getting ready to check out, the cashier is actually writing some type of notes on the wall. So I'm like, okay, whatever, I'm here to cash out, I'm gonna get my sodas, and I'm gonna leave and I'm gonna mind my business and go on and doing what I'm doing. So as I'm getting ready to cash out, the cashier then says, I'm having a problem writing these days. I guess calligraphy is a lost art. So I went to engage him, and I'm like, well, not really. Calligraphy's been around in Asia for over thousands of years. So then he came back at me and he said, well, not really. The Roman Empire in Europe, they've been around a lot longer than China and Africa. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay. He just made a simple statement, and I guess he wanted me to respond to his statement, so I gave him my opinion. And normally, when we think about calligraphy, we think about, well, calligraphy is usually attributed to Asian characters. When we think about Roman letters, we think about penmanship. So I could understand had he gave it back to me in a different way by saying his penmanship could use some work, then, we could have went more further on with the conversation. But then, as I got ready to respond again about his rebuttal to what I had said regarding craftsmanship, regarding calligraphy, and how he had to tell me Africa and Roman Empire and Europe been around longer than China, I said to myself, well, I'm just here to get my sodas and I'm here to check out. And then, behind me there was a line that was building up. So then I stepped back from the picture. This is where we get to the social big picture or the big mosaic. And I looked around, there's people getting ready to check out their items. I'm here, they're waiting for me to check out my items, and here's this cashier trying to tell me what he thinks he knows about something he really doesn't know at all to try to make me look stupid. Now, I could have went back and said something to really shut him down, but I didn't, because this is where the social big picture come in. I stepped back and I looked and I said, wait a minute. This is why he works in this convenience store. He works in this convenience store because obviously he did something in life that he did not completely do. Now, honestly, if he knew so fucking much, he would not have been working in that gas station. Right? Think about it. So I could have easily said something back to him, but then that would have prolonged everyone else from there getting ready to check out their items. But instead, I decided to just humble myself. I said, this idiot works in a gas station for a reason. And so for all of you out there who have found different situations like that, people who will start something to get an answer out of you to create an argument, you will find people like that in life who have nothing better to do than to create a meaningless argument. And when you find yourself in that situation, just blink. Just blink. Just look, blink, and walk away. The social big picture. Step back from the situation, look at things from abroad, and consider the source, because then you'll realize, aha, because 10 years from now, he's still going to be in the same place where he was already at, because he's going to be in there in that convenience store. The social big picture. So that's what it is today, the social big picture. Find yourself in a situation where someone's trying to start an argument, and don't say nothing at all, because even if you could say something back, you won't win. Walk away. It'll be okay. So this is it, the social big picture, as Folsom Elizabeth Cookye continues to go and expose the idiots. Say Cookye! Please leave a comment on this video. Let me know what you think, and thank you, Murphy, for all of your work. See you next month with the next episode, episode 3 of the Folsom Elizabeth Cookye Show, as Folsom Elizabeth Cookye continues to expose the idiots.